All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We are going to get started. This is the Parks and Community Services Commission meeting of December 8th, 2022, and I call the meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. First order of business, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Brown, would you be so kind to lead us in the pledge? Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Next order of business, we'll have a roll call.
Commissioner Murphy. Here. Commissioner Brown. Present. Vice Chair Dorn Parker. Here. Chair Rutherford.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mrs. Green.
Then you.
Next matter of business is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. So if there's any public comments at this time, I see there is one. Welcome, Mr. Martinez. You have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, members of the Parks and Community Services Commission. I know a lot of people like to talk about open space and how we need a lot of open space, and we do need a lot of open space. But I want to reframe that to talk about public space. Something that I think is very much lacking in our city is the opportunity for indoor public space, a place that people can just hang out while not being outside in 50-degree weather, someplace for a community nonprofit to do their meetings indoors and not have to go and to a private business and maybe try and rent out a space, cost a lot of money. So I just wanted to advocate for an indoor public open space that's available most times that any other public spot would be open and is available for free to the public. I think if the community center could be opened up for a lot longer than it is right now, if the hours could be not just for whenever there's a private event, but for when there's, just at any time, I think that would be of minimal cost to the city. Might be a member of staff or two that would need to be there just to make sure nothing bad happens. But yeah, I just wanted to advocate for indoor public space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. We appreciate your comment. Seeing no more public comments in the chamber, Ms. Green, are there any members of the public over Zoom that would like to make a public comment? You can raise your hand at this time.
Yes, Ms. Hendricks, please, you may speak.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Nice to see you. Yes, I would like to say that I've been at Fairview Park a lot on the weekends, enjoying it because it is such a unique, natural open space that is outside. But there have been some things that have been happening that are not supposed to be happening. And when I called park ranger on a Saturday, I was told that there was no park ranger working that day. And I was very surprised because it seems like on the weekends, a park ranger should be there more than during the weekdays. Everyone's enjoying it. And I was wondering if the Parks Commission maybe could investigate that further and find out why is this happening? This is a unique park. The resources are nowhere else. Endangered and threatened species, and we don't have a park ranger. It doesn't seem okay. And I was hoping you could investigate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. We appreciate your comments. And I think that is a good item to flag for Director Minter and Mr. Ryan to look into in terms of the park ranger issue that you mentioned. So thank you for flagging that. Ms. Green, are there any more members of the public to comment over Zoom?
No, Mr. Chair.
Awesome. So at this time, we will close general public comment for matters not on the agenda. And now we'll move to commissioner comments and suggestions. So in no particular order, Commissioner Brown, would you like to start us off tonight?
Now it's on. Thank you. Yeah, I just had a couple of comments actually. So first is just to thank Mr. Ryan and Mr. Minter for some help. A couple of months ago, my daughter plays AYSO in Costa Mesa, and we found ourselves, once the time change happened, playing in the dark. And so I'd reached out to ask for the lights to be turned on. It seems really simple, and I really appreciated that the lights were turned on so they were able to practice. They were able to make it into the finals, and I just want to acknowledge for a moment how thankful I am for the parks in Costa Mesa. And I heard it from a lot of the other parents when we were at the Jack Hammett, whatever, a weekend ago, playing in the finals. People really appreciated the parks in Costa Mesa, and were remarking on what such, the nice fields we had. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. And the second thing I wanted to ask about is whether we would get an update tonight on the open space master plan. I didn't see it in either of the director's reports, but maybe it'll be something that Director Minter talks about. I know of many people who are interested in this, and I would like to give them a heads up as to when we will receive the draft plan so that people can prepare. I know it will be a lengthy document, so the more heads up we have in terms of when that will be available, the better. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Murphy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, I would first like to start off by saying thank you to Mr. Mittner for fixing it looks like on the director's report we have the lights getting fixed at Jack Hammett over in the corner there. For those of you who don't go to Friday night lights as regularly as I do, those lights getting fixed is really important. It is very strange to be standing there in the middle of a game and have the whole place go dark all at once. So thank you for taking care of that. It was kind of, it was a little weird and a little dangerous, I think, to watch all the kids and the families try to rush out of there in the pitch black. So thank you for dealing with that, because it needed to be fixed, and those corner lights getting fixed are very important. I too am curious about when we're gonna see the plan for all of the parks and open space. It'll be great to hear more about that. I'm sure we will hear more about that. I've received a lot of questions about that, as well as I've been receiving a lot of questions about Fairview and when that master plan is going to start being reviewed, and when community input is going to be made available, and when are those meetings, what's the cadence, how are they going to be available to the community, those meetings for input. So that's all I have, and thanks very much for all you're doing. We appreciate it. And the Snoopy house looks like it's going to be great. I love driving by and seeing all the lights coming up, so thanks for that. It looks great.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Trustee Murphy, and Vice Chair Dorn Parker.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. As it was October, it was on a vacation where I had no Wi-Fi, which was good and bad. No way to log in. A couple things. I first want to thank Mr. Ryan, Director Mentor, and also Councilmember Harlan that had a meeting at Brentwood Park with the Brentwood Park family leaders. They've done a lot of work and a lot of research and surveying their community, and I just want to thank all the time. There's a lot of questions about infrastructure. There's also questions about different kinds of resources available, and the families there were very grateful. So thank you. I really appreciate the time. Also want to thank Mr. Ryan. He was very fast on the ready, where some of the families were concerned. The Jordan Park is so well used. It's even more used than before. And there were needs for benches and places to sit down and have sort of lunch, you'd say, or snacks for all the little kids. So thank you. That was very quick. The one thing I've noticed, and it might be helpful, I call it a governance calendar. We all have questions about, we have all these projects and community has projects. We have the Ketchum Library Board, we have the Fairview upgrade, we have the Brentwood, we have the open space. So I'm wondering if it would be helpful to us as commissioners and therefore the public if we had sort of a evolving calendar. And I don't know what better way, as I've been on governance teams on the schools and now over at the community college, is we sort of had a governance calendar of sort of what was in the hopper, what stage it was, so that it was part of an ongoing report so that we would know, like, at what stage, simple, so that we just knew that this, because we know the staff is really, has all of this on their sort of their whiteboard, and they know there's a whole list and there's different hot buttons, but it would be nice to have that be more available so that we know, for example, the open space, we know that there's been some challenges in getting it finalized to us, but we do also know some very engaged community members are waiting for it. So that would just be my, we have Fairview, we have Tennis Park, we have Libel Park, we have open space, we have so many items that are in the hopper right now, which is incredibly exciting, but it would be nice to have some sort of a reporting structure and system what's going on so that we can be informed. So other than that, I just want to thank everybody. Amazing job that the staff and Director Mentor and his team does, and so thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Vice Chair Dorn Parker. For my comments, just wanted to quickly report, thank Mr. Ryan and Director Minter for doing a walkthrough of Gisler Park in District 2 last week and discussing ideas, hearing about some community needs. I wanted to second what Vice Chair Dorn Parker said. I think it's a very exciting time in the city of Costa Mesa with the amount of funding that's been committed for a series of park improvements and park projects. Really an exciting time for the PACS department, but I think what that also means is we need more communication to the commission, to the council, to the public about all of these different projects that are in the hopper. I think a governance calendar is an excellent idea. In other cities, we see that take the form of, it's called a long form agenda, an agenda that's more vague, but goes longer out, 6 months in some cases. So I would really support that and kindly ask for that from staff to increase the transparency and engagement with the public on all these different items that are moving through. So I don't want that to be interpreted as a negative request, but just reflective of the exciting times that we're in the city of Costa Mesa with the volume of work that's being done. I want to thank Mr. Martinez for the comment about indoor public space. And I wanted to actually do a temperature check with fellow commissioners. I think it's really an exciting time that the Norma Herzog Community Center has been opened up for the public, and the city really now has a full suite of community centers for the public. But I was also really concerned when I saw the rental rates for those centers. So if it's okay, I wanted to just temperature check with fellow commissioners, but I think it would be really quite appropriate for us to bring back and look at the rental rates for community centers, for especially nonprofit and resident groups. I don't think we should be raising rates for those groups. So just doing a quick temperature check. If it's all right, everybody's on board with it. Awesome. So Director Mentor, I would kindly ask that would be brought back at a future meeting for us to look at rental rates for community facilities. And then just a quick question. We, of course, dearly miss Commissioner Charlene Ashendorf. We know she's doing great things over on the Arts Commission. So Director Minter, we just wanted to know when those application period will open to the public, if you had an update on that.
Sure. I will actually turn it over to our guest staff tonight. I do appreciate Ms. Brenda Green being here to support our commission tonight. Did you want to answer Chairperson Rutherford's question about the recruitment for our vacant positions?
Actually, yes, we will be beginning recruitments for all the commissions next week. And then it'll go for about a month, maybe 5 weeks. And then we're hoping we will appoint on January 17th or the first meeting in February.
Awesome. Thank you for that update,
So
Ms.
if you
Green.
know anybody that is interested, okay, thanks.
And
Awesome.
I know we will be having an additional vacancy. I wasn't sure if that commissioner wanted to make any comments related to that.
I wasn't sure if you wanted me to do that at the end or now or whenever.
That was fine. It seems timely.
Yeah, let's turn it back over to Commissioner Murphy for a moment. There's some special news to share regarding that front. But yes, to anybody listening, we would love for you to consider applying to join the best commission in Costa Mesa. But yes, Commissioner Murphy.
Thank you. Yes, this is the best commission in Costa Mesa. I do agree with that. And it does make me really sad to have to resign my position on the Parks Commission because I did win election for school board for Newport Mesa for District 2. And so I have been informed that they are incompatible positions, I believe, is the language that the city attorney used, mostly due to the fact that the joint use agreement between Newport Mesa and the city of Costa Mesa is up for renegotiation. So I do not want to be the thorn in anyone's side or the problem child. So I will unfortunately resign, which I think is a great commission with wonderful staff and great fellow commissioners. And I do enjoy the work that we do. And I think it is so important for Costa Mesa, the way we've been able to move such important projects forward and all the progress we've made. So I'll just keep watching, from home on YouTube and on my iPad. I carry you around the house as I do stuff. So I hope you all at home do that too and stay abreast of what's going on in the Parks and Rec Commission because this is a good group and we do good work. So thanks so much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Murphy, we would like to thank you for your service. And also, I remind you that if you could please complete a Form 700.
Yes. Yes. Top of my inbox. Yes. Thank you.
Definitely want to second that, though. Congrats are definitely in order to Michelle on your big victory and your swearing in next week to the school board. So if anybody wants to attend, that's next Tuesday for the school board. Also wanted to just congratulate our mayor and city council, really historic election, quite exciting that they've all been reelected. So really going to be a wonderful 2 and 4 more years. And then also wanted to thank our newly reelected supervisor, Katrina Foley. There was a really exciting announcement made at the city council meeting about a funding commitment from the county for the Lions Park Cafe, addition of a cafe at Lions Park, and then the expansion of the skate park at Tewinkle. So Director Minter will give you a friendly nudge on those items later in your director's report. I'll save more detailed questions then, but just more evidence of an exciting time it is in Costa Mesa. And then lastly, saw Snoopy House outside. It's coming to life, and we know that doesn't happen without the PAX department, so thank you for all the hours that are going into that. We see and appreciate you. With that, we're going to end commissioner comments, and then we will go to old business. And the only item of old business we have is the minutes from our last meeting. At this time, are there any members of the public that wish to make a public comment on the minutes from our October 13th meeting?
And we have no members on Zoom.
Nobody on Zoom? Awesome. We'll close public comment. Is there a motion from the commission?
I think I can make a motion. I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes. Whoops. I make the motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
You should be clicking your button.
Awesome. Motion by Vice Chair Dorn Parker, seconded by Commissioner Brown, and we'll call the question. And the floor is yours, Ms. Green.
I think I can vote.
Chair Rutherford, if you could please vote.
Sorry.
There we go. Motion carries 4-0. All right.
Awesome. No more old business. The first item of new business is the donation of a tree and memorial plaque at Jordan Park. And Director Minter, the floor is yours.
I will give that to Rob Ryan, actually.
Oh, Mr. Ryan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Rutherford, Commissioners. The next item is the request for a donation of a plaque and tree at Jordan Park. Maintenance Services received a letter from Mrs. Bree Plude, mother of Mark Ward, requesting permission from this commission to donate a tree and a memorial plaque at Jordan Park in memory of her son, who passed away on August 15th, 2022. Mark grew up on the east side of Costa Mesa. He attended Kaiser Elementary School, Ensign Intermediate School, and finally Newport Harbor High School, where he graduated in 1999. Jordan Park and the Boys Club holds a special significance for Mark and his family. Mark and his two sisters would walk to the Boys and Girls Club after school each day as they waited to pick up by their parents, participate in the various programs that the Boys and Girls Club offered, and enjoyed playing on the playground equipment there at Jordan Park. In fact, it was at the Boys and Girls Club that Mark discovered his passion for basketball. He played in a league, and his dad was a coach at the time. He developed his skills over the years and eventually earning him a spot as a starter at Newport Harbor High School basketball team. Another great connection to the location is that Mark's 8-year-old nephew, Nash, currently plays basketball there. And the family enjoys watching young Nash kind of relive some of those dreams that his uncle had on those courts. Tree and a plaque at that location will provide the family a great spot to gather and remember Mark and the special times at that location specifically. Obviously, the submission request meets the requirements set forth by City Council policy. Staff has reviewed the suggested location of Jordan Park. We haven't identified a specific location within the park. We've provided several options, and we'll review those again with the applicant once approved. But the location is absolutely suitable for this type of memorial land plaque, especially in this case. We'll work with the donor to identify the location and schedule the installation. Staff would recommend that the Parks and Community Services Commission approve the request for the donation of the tree and plaque for installation at Jordan Park in memory of Mr. Mark Ward. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Ms. Plood shared that she would not be able to attend this evening. She's actually taking care of her grandson tonight, Nash, and didn't feel that an 8-year-old would enjoy attending a commission meeting. No offense to the commissioners, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. And yes, we're sorry that Bree couldn't join us tonight, but we will definitely keep her in our thoughts. At this time, before we go to commissioner comments, are there any members of the public that wish to make a comment on this item? If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, there are no public comments.
Awesome. Okay, we'll close public comments on this item and then open it up for commissioner comments. All right, looks like no comments.
Well, I just want to thank the family. Obviously, the wards are part of the east side over by Jordan, and as many families over there have really been integrated into that park and the Boys and Girls Club. What an honor that they decided to donate to that park in honor of Mark. And as we've been saying, trees are so needed all over the place, and it's wonderful to see that that's where they decided to honor Mark. So thank you.
Awesome. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve. And seconded by Vice Chair Dorn Parker. Thank you. And
I'll start voting.
we'll call the question.
Motion carries 4-0.
Awesome. Thank you again to the Ward family and Bree.
Next item.
Next item on the agenda, new business, is discussion on park reservation permits. And Director Mentor, I believe this one, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. At the request of the commission, this item is being brought forward for your review. From the time that I started here in Costa Mesa, it's a topic that I'd heard some discussion about. This is more of a study session type item to give the commissioners background on the history of the ordinance as it relates to park use and permits. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the report. The section 12-53, I've taken a little excerpt from that that's listed there on page 1. And then in your attachment 1, there's also the full extent of that ordinance. Included in the item is information about what some of the other cities do. I did a request through our director's connection to make sure that we had an idea of what other cities were doing in terms of group sizes that were required to have permits. A lot of them, they do if a group is X number of people or larger, you're required to get a permit. If a permit isn't obtained, you can do first come, first serve. But for the most part, these were the responses that I got from the organizations or from the cities, in and around our area. So I do appreciate other directors for helping me put that information together. According to the report, it does go back. It dates back to like 1968 when the ordinance was first created. It was modified in 1986, and if you ever want to learn a lot about municipal codes, our city clerk's website has amazing access to the history. Takes a little bit of digging, or a lot of digging, I should say. But the history of the ordinance, anytime a portion of the ordinance changes, gets clarification, it's a pretty large section. But if you're ever wondering about municipal code related things, feel free to go to the website. It's over in the section that's called like I want to, and you can go find forms and ordinances and code and all that stuff. So I'll keep my presentation brief and allow for council or for commissioner questions, but this is the information that currently exists here in the city. The ordinance has, like I said, been around for quite some time, so I will turn it over to you, Chairperson, and be ready for questions.
Thank you, Director Minter. I appreciate that this is before us to look at as a study session item. I appreciate you bearing with my bugging about this item, and I've asked for this multiple times to come forward, so I'm very excited that we have an opportunity to discuss this. First, I think we should hear from the public. If there's any members of the public that wish to make a comment on this or weigh in. So at this time, we'll open public comment on the park permit discussion. And Mr. Martinez, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So first of all, I definitely think that the current limit of 10 is way too low. Definitely needs to either go up or just be eliminated entirely, like in Santa Ana, Newport Beach. I remember when I was in high school in the school groups, we would just go over to Tewinkle Park, and that's where we would have our events. And we were high schoolers. We didn't know that we needed a permit, so we were technically breaking the law. Cool. I think it definitely needs to be removed, but I also think that a lot of portions of our municipal code need a lot of review. I'm on the Active Transportation Committee, not speaking for them, but we submitted a letter to the City Council probably a year and a half ago now that said that Title IV of our municipal code relating to bicycles needed to be updated, and nothing's happened. So I really hope the commission's success with getting this municipal code updated, because we haven't really succeeded in that. But I was also maybe hoping that since it's in your park ranger report, some portions of Title IV of our municipal code, maybe you guys could take a look at it. And since the commission has more clout than my poor meager committee, maybe you guys can actually do something about this too. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Martinez. Ms. Green, are there any members of the public over Zoom that would like to comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The first one is Matt Garcia, please.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Commission, for allowing the opportunity to speak tonight and for bringing this topic up. I think it's very important. The staff report was very informative, so thank you to the staff for putting that together. I would like to echo what the last speaker mentioned. That a 10-person limit is very restrictive. An organization of persons of 10 or more, as defined in the current ordinance, is extremely broad. And a group of school children could be considered to be breaking law. The need for open space that can be used by the community is really important, and the ability to gather for activities and social occasions is critical to our community. So many members of the community do not have access to spaces where they can host or gather with a group of people of a reasonable size, like 20, 30, and 40 people. So I would very much support significantly increasing this limit or eliminating it altogether. I'm also concerned with selective enforcement of this ordinance. I know I saw that no citations were issued, but I don't think I saw if there was warnings or anything issued. So I'd be concerned with selective enforcement as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. We appreciate your comment. Ms. Green, are there any other members of the public to comment?
Yes, Jeff, you may speak.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak today. Again, like to echo everyone else's comments before me. This ordinance is very broad, and where it says 10 people in an organization, it doesn't really define an organization. Like everyone else has said, this could be a group of children, from a school trip on a, to go to a park, and it could be, confused if someone looks at having a birthday party at a park and not sure if they can have their birthday without getting a permit that they may, not have time to get or may not know how to get. So yeah, it doesn't really seem like a need for this ordinance, and especially with all these, illnesses going around, that it's much safer to meet in a group outside if they don't have space indoors to meet but would like to be outside. This would be might be a hindrance to that too. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, no further speakers.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff, for the comment. Thank you, Ms. Green. And at this time, we'll close public comment and bring it back up for commissioner suggestions or comments.
It's interesting, when I saw this on the agenda, I hadn't been at the other meeting, and it was interesting. I had no idea if 10 kids show up, like at Kaiser Park, that they're violating the permit. And my son, who's now in his 30s, but he used to bribe his buddies because he loved to play baseball, and he put a basket on his bike, and he'd put chocolate bars and anything else, and he'd bribe them to go to a park so that he could get practice for pop-up and ground games, and that he completely violated this every time, because he would always get 10 to 15 kids. We see so many kids, whether it's e-bikes or biking, all throughout, showing up in our community, and that's what we want. This is really important we review it. And I guess I have a question for our director. So if we had a large group that did, like, what are those blow up, jumpy things, or did events, they would need to get a special event permit. Is that correct? Is there a way? So if it's a larger organized event, there's a code in place where they would need to get a permit regardless of the size if they have, organized games and things like that? I'm just trying to get a perspective here.
Yes, thank you. You can have a bouncer at certain parks, but not necessarily all. You do need a permit, a park permit. There are some parks that were under review right now due to complaints from local residents about the noise associated with generators and all that with bouncers. So, that is definitely an ongoing topic that we're reviewing. But if you want to have a bouncer at a park, you should have a park permit. Or the exception would be if it's a larger event and you would do a special event permit. Special event permits are completely different. There's more review process. There's a completely different set of fees. We have a number of special events that we do review, monthly, but that is kind of a different scenario for special events.
So I just wanted to find out, because my personal take is on this type of, is either to eliminate it completely. We have, Newport Beach right next door has a no minimum, which then would encourage neighborhood families to gather and utilize our outdoor space. And then if it becomes more organized, then we have a special permit in place. So that is where my feelings is seeing how my neighborhood kids and how my own kids used our community spaces, and lots more than 10 kids.
If I can clarify, I think when you look into the language, and I'm trying to go back 60 years or whatever, and put yourself in the position of the council at the time, it tries to specify that an organized event through an organization, which would not include 10 children from the neighborhood that just happened to go down and be playing at the park. It was designed to keep out larger organizations from monopolizing parks. So you see there in the language, it talks about purpose where such use will exclude or interfere with use by other members of the public. So it's taking areas that should be open to the public, because I've heard commissioners say the public should have access to our parks. And if you have a business, if you have a church that comes to a park and basically takes over the park to the fashion that the public wouldn't be able to enjoy it. And I know some cities have very strict regulations about they don't want groups from outside of their city coming with these large events to their parks and taking the opportunity for locals to do it. So there is kind of a duality to it, just to be aware. I think the chart clearly shows that we're, not in line with a lot of the other cities, but you also have to consider that each city has different parks, different park sizes, different picnic areas. I didn't get into all the rules and regulations regarding permits and picnic shelter rentals and things like that. But, I think generically speaking, 10 seems very small, but it is intended to protect the public, even if, the comments from some commissioners are, we're looking to cite, neighborhood kids. That was never the intention of the ordinance as I read it. It was actually to protect those parks so that those kids could come and enjoy the park. The other side of it, we can talk about maintenance is if there is larger groups and larger activities, we try to limit that use or direct them to areas that are maintained specifically for organized soccer, organized baseball, organized lacrosse, whatever the sport. So it also was there to kind of protect that open space from being damaged from overuse. Now, that's another duality is, well, overuse means the public's using it. That would be great. But if a regular group, an organized group, is out there damaging an area to where now the public no longer wants to use it because it's nothing but dirt or mud, then I don't think we're offering open space the way we should. So there's a few other things involved in that, but I think you can, as I mentioned before, there is plenty of opportunity to review this and make a recommendation to council at a later date that that minimum be increased.
Yeah, Commissioner Brown, go ahead.
I just have a question about the process. I would love to be educated as to what goes into changing an ordinance. What does that look like?
The first step would be we would put an item on the agenda actually requesting the commission provide input feedback to make a recommendation to the change. Like I said, this was a study session to give background, allow public input. Based on how the commission and their comments that are made tonight, staff will then prepare a report to come back to a future meeting in which a recommendation can be made by the commission that the city council can change an ordinance to and then include language based on that. I will offer the floor to Ms. Green. Is there anything else that they would need to do? Yeah,
And in general, once it goes to council, the council generally has a public hearing and that we notice for. And then there's 2 readings. So the first reading is where they talk about it and discuss it, make changes, and then make the recommendation that comes back for a second reading. And then generally there's just minor changes on the second reading. If there's another round of major changes, then it'll come back again for a second reading. But generally there's 2 readings. And then if it gets adopted, it takes effect 30 days later.
And one other note, there might be other cleanup that maybe staff recommend. The language in some ordinances is a little bit outdated, like it doesn't talk about a community services director. It talks about the administrative services manager or director. So there might be other cleanup things that staff bring with whatever the recommendation is, but we'll try to focus the commission's recommendation on whatever it is they hope to change that's not administrative in nature.
Awesome. Well, I'll just chime in as well. I think, from the public testimony is clear. And certainly from, I think, anybody I've personally asked about this. But yeah, and Jason, you've done a great report here. It makes it very clear that I think we're out of line with where other cities have moved in terms of this policy. And I think there's good reason for us to adjust this because when you look at the language, and I think those are legitimate concerns about organized or business entities coming in and, tearing up the park. Rob and, your team work so hard to maintain our parks. But this language is extremely broad to the point where it's arguably very restrictive on residents. If you could, in theory, keep the language of quote unquote sports league, but when you say any quote unquote social organization, that's where you get tricky. Quote unquote social club having more than 10 kids, actually, I think we want social clubs of, if there's a social club of 15 kids out there that wants to use our park, I think we want them to. That's an activity that should be encouraged, and the policy should facilitate that and make sure that the city's open to that. So if other commissioners are okay with this, I think we should really move forward and bring back an item that brings our code in line with what other cities are doing, not just in line with other cities though, but that, sets a model and a message that we are a city with a progressive and strong parks department. And I think, that's a reflection on all of you and the work that, this department does, because I think this is a very forward-thinking and progressive and strong department. And so I think outdated elements of municipal code like this should be updated to reflect that. So that's the spirit which I'm asking for this to be moved forward.
I concur, Chair, because if staff can clarify, because now that the director explained, but I saw this and said 10 or more members or attending desiring any use. To me, that's members, whether or not they considered a club, a student club or group, or kids playing baseball. I think we need to clarify this and clean it up so that it's very clear what the intent is and what the concern is and how it reflects what the other cities are doing and, quite frankly, what our community members require for our open space parks and use. So thank you for explaining that, but I think that's a point well intended how I read it compared to what the intent was. So thank you.
And again, I can only offer my thought as to what they were thinking or possibly thinking at the time, but also in trying to manage the resources. We do want, we've had examples of Palorino Park, which is a very small park, long, narrow, with larger groups meeting out there, which basically take most of the space that the public might enjoy. And that was just one example, where we have designated spaces for organized activities. But if commissioners do have suggestions, or they're welcome to send them to staff as specifics, or they can bring them to that meeting when we have it on the agenda. That either option is good. We can talk about it at that next agenda meeting. However, just keeping in mind, it would be fantastic if a member of the commission acted on behalf of the full commission and showed up at the council meeting to speak on the matter, or one or two. That is also an option to make your voices heard before the council at that meeting, eventually when it gets presented to the council. You don't have to volunteer right now. But I think Commissioner Murphy's, she has a pass.
Well,
But I'd happily show up.
Actually, and you could show up and
that can
be past commissioner in your role as speaking on behalf of school children.
Well, because are we still doing comments?
please, yeah.
Because my thought too was that I think all of my son's teams go practice on the field, on the parks, and then they're definitely groups of more than 10, so they've probably all been in violation, I guess, every time they go have football practice out on one of the fields, right? Is that what that is?
If they have a permit to.
But this is practice. Like sometimes they'll just text like on a Saturday, hey guys, you want to go, you know what I mean? And the whole team goes down and practices. And then we have in College Park, we do a neighborhood 4th of July softball game, and the whole neighborhood goes down and plays softball. So I think that also means I was in violation of so, I mean, that would be my concern, is that for people who don't want to be in violation and understand exactly why you want to have a little bit of control over it, because we want to keep the parks clean and we want to make sure that everybody has they're available and everyone can use them. I can certainly understand that, but you would hate to, and it looks like, yes, it does look like we haven't issued any citations, but if this rule has somehow discouraged other groups from using the fields and the parks, then I think that's not what we're trying to promote and do. And I apologize, I haven't tried to, I was looking at making an appointment for a park. Do we list out kind of like which parks would be better for which kind of activities, to your point of not wanting like Palorino Park? Like you don't want like a whole baseball game to go down to Polarino because it's long and narrow. Do we give like recommendations on the website as to what kind of activities are better suited for the different parks? Like if somebody was looking,
I mean, we have staff engagement that would often help the walk-in groups. You know, a lot of times location is the number one determining factor as to where a birthday party gets held. And if it's a birthday party where the kids want to play kickball or whatever, then, you know, it's maybe not always the best, but we try to guide them, list the amenities at the park. Excuse me. That helps people align, but it is, you know, a little bit staff driven, but there are some improvements we're trying to make to the website.
yeah.
That can hopefully, maybe we can incorporate some of these suggestions.
Maybe some recommendations of, or even just, you know, not great for football or however you want to word it, but this park is not the best one for your neighborhood flag football game.
It's, you'd be surprised, or maybe not, the number of different requests that we get for our parks, from things like animal reptile petting zoos to game trucks to laser tag to Nerf gun competitions to, like, yeah, there's a never-ending list of requests that we're like, okay, I guess we can do that. Okay, I guess we can do that. And, you know, it's important that you protect the resources at the park. You don't want to do anything that damages it, whether it's the grass, the trees, whatever. How many piñatas do you find? You know, damage from piñatas, where people throw piñatas around tree branches and they're pulling them and then they pick the wrong branch and the whole branch comes down. Like, we try to discourage things like that. But yeah, it's one of the fun parts about managing parks.
Yep.
The
Well,
good
it's
and bad
because you're doing
news
such
of
a-
having parks be so used is they become very used, but it's kind of when you surrey a parking lot and then cars drive on it and your beautiful painted gorgeous parking lot becomes full of oil again, but that's what its use is. But I can recognize that there's overuse and there's decisions of where, or better places than others. And I like your idea of sort of the 10 most likely, like piñatas, or, you know, you're going to run a informal football game, flag football game or whatever. So yeah, so it's wonderful. Our parks are being so used, and I think it'll just grow if we really help it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would be great to see our minimum in line with with the rest of the cities, because 10 does seem quite low. So that would be, I guess, one of my last comments, unfortunately.
I thought it was interesting that it started at 25 and then was lowered to 10. That was my favorite part of the research, you know, going back through different ordinances to see the process.
Yeah, on that point, Director Mentor, I was particularly, I guess you would say, intrigued by to your point about the adjustment of 25 to 10, when that happened in the 1980s. One of the reasons was, quote unquote, concerns of increased trash and the use of profanity by park users. So I don't know what that's coded language for, but regardless of that, I agree with the other commissioners that I think we should definitely be in line with the minimum of other cities, but why not at the front of the pack?
It's interesting you brought up about that, because in the 80s over at Kaiser, there was informal families in the neighborhood that were doing adult men's soccer games. And we as a community asked the city to, because they were using trash, and the city, some of the leaders at the time just felt the best way to not have them use our park there was simply not to clean up the trash and to blame them for everything. So I think there was a different mindset of how well our open space should be used by whom. And so I don't know, that was just my personal anecdotal, because we were pretty angry that they were trying to use that to push out some of our neighbors that they didn't think were our neighbors living in our neighborhood, and they were having these big family, awesome soccer games, informal, but they didn't, like, the trash cans were already full Friday afternoon, and there was no space for trash at that time. So it just gives you a little bit of, it didn't surprise me that they tried to move it from 25 to 10 at that point, because there was a different philosophy than I think we have now. I think use is really important.
And I know ordinances have to be usually citywide unless there's a separate ordinance for certain sections. So keep in mind the ordinance applies to both large and small parks. And, you know, one thing to keep in mind, I don't think we would want a limit of 100 for some of our neighborhood parks, but the ordinance would still need to be specified if we were doing things differently.
Understood, and I appreciate your attention to detail, Director Mentor. But I think you are hearing a consensus that at least 25, if not 50, is definitely appropriate for the city of Costa Mesa. So I don't know if there needs to be a formal action or a motion taken by us, or if the feedback you've received tonight is sufficient to bring this back as an agenda item.
Yes, I think there's definitely sufficient feedback. You know, I think there was definitely unanimous consent from both the public and the commissioners that 10 was not appropriate. I don't know that I heard that 50 was, however. You know, we can bring that back and let the commission make the motions how they see fit.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Director Mentor, and thank you to the members of the public that weighed in. We greatly appreciate your input. So I think that's it. We'll move to receive and file Director Mentor's report. And that's the end of new business item number 2. And now we're on to the monthly reports, the Park Ranger report. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on the Park Ranger report? Oh, do we need to do a motion to receive and file, Ms. Green? Okay, cool. No worries. Thank you. I just saw the motion thing. Okay, you're all good. We'll open up public comment on the Park Ranger report if there's any members of the public that wish to comment on the Park Ranger.
Want a brief staff presentation before we did that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so as we missed the meeting for the Veterans Day holiday, you have 2 Park Ranger reports before you. It's been mentioned both by a member of the public and I think by other commissioners that we are still short on park rangers. It's definitely something that staff are working with our park ranger program about in terms of the lieutenants that oversee the program. It is a big staffing issue, right? Trying to make sure we have them on board. Park rangers that were formerly doing park patrols have been assigned to other shifts that really, you know, we can't live without. And I know many people would say, well, we can't live without patrols of our parks. Obviously, if you look at both the October and November reports, you'll see that citations are way down. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, you know, that's entirely up to you. However, it is obvious that there's been fewer patrols only because there's fewer rangers to be able to complete those patrols. That is by no means a permanent solution. That is just a temporary solution that our police department is trying to work through, along with human resources and getting those positions filled. There's a little bit of flux going on over there, but you know, I've talked to the chief about it and talked to lieutenants, and we are working on a plan, and I will bring information back each month to the commission when we do these reports. So I appreciate their diligence in getting their reports. Obviously, having additional park rangers for Fairview Park would be awesome, but not just Fairview Park, for our other parks as well. So I know that the citations listed were pretty much limited to Talbot Park. And if people ask, well, why Talbot, not our other city parks? Well, Talbot is technically in the city of Costa Mesa, and we need to patrol it like anyone else. And there are call outs and things like that for them as well. So that concludes the staff presentation on that.
Thank you, Director Mentor. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on the Park Ranger report?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Green. Thank you. Yes, I understand that Talbot Park is the only one listed on the Rangers report, and that's because there's a lack of rangers. There's a lot going on that is not seen. This is not okay. We have accepted grants with endangered and threatened species in a park, and yet we don't enforce any rules. This is not okay. We really need to stop and make good decisions. We are in global burning. This is unprecedented in our lifetime. And it's up to little committees and commissions like yourselves to make good decisions. So please do so. Thank you.
No further speakers, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Thank you, Ms. Hendricks, for your comment. I think all of us commissioners share your concern about staffing issues with the park rangers. So Director Minter, we appreciate your attention to that. And if you could bring back an update to us and also keep the council updated if there's any continued park ranger issues, I think that would be very appropriate.
I will most likely leave that to the police chief, who oversees that program, but I can definitely bring updates back to the commission. And I, too, support Ms. Hendricks' statements as well as the commission's. I want the parks to be patrolled. I know Rob wants the parks to be patrolled. So we're all in agreement. It's, trying to accomplish that task as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Director Minter. Commissioner Brown.
When I first joined the commission, I think maybe it was around this time last year, we had the opportunity to do ride-alongs with some of the park rangers. And at the time, I think he quoted, when I asked him how many park rangers were on duty in Costa Mesa, if I'm remembering correctly, I think he said 8. I'm just curious, how many park rangers do we currently employ in Costa Mesa right now? Even just a range would be interesting to know.
I don't feel comfortable answering that question because I don't have a factual answer from police, but I can include that in my next report. I believe there's between 6 to 8 budgeted positions, but as these rangers are being reassigned, they may be taken off a shift to do a patrol, and so I don't have an exact number to share, and I would not want to guesstimate at this time. But I can work with PD to bring back a response at our next meeting. It's way lower than what we want it to be.
Understood. Would appreciate you bringing back that update, though, Jason. All right. If there's no other commissioner comments, at this time we'll move to receive and file the park ranger reports. And then the last item on our agenda is the director's report. So the floor is yours again, Director Minter.
Thank you very much. Man. Much like the park ranger reports, there are 2 separate reports, one for October and one for November. A few things to point out, and I will kind of cover some of the questions that were asked earlier before turning it over to Monique to talk more about programs. Obviously, the open space master plan was a question that came up. It was a challenging project to be working on, and if anyone wants to do master plans in the future, I strongly recommend not taking a 3-year hiatus during the process. We are working with staff, with public works staff and maintenance staff, to look at the CIP implications and some of the things that were mentioned in the report. And it is, to be fully transparent, this will not get passed, will not get approved without the commission reviewing it and public input. So there's at no point an attempt to try to slam this through. What we want is a report that we can live with, right, that we can be proud of, that we can take to the commission from the staff perspective. So right now there's just been ongoing review and research on how are we going to best represent information that was presented in a draft 3, 4, 5 years ago with what's current, and making sure all that gets updated with current information. So, we've had staff meetings as recently as this week, trying to work towards that goal of, getting it updated, working with the consultant to make sure all the changes are necessary. And it's just, again, most of the stuff now is budgetarily. It will not do the commission, it will not do the council any good to give them 5-year-old data, right? But we just need to go through the process of what do we need to show for current and how far back. So that was one. There was a question about the Fairview Park Master Plan. We've completed the RFP process and are all ready to make a recommendation to City Council. That is scheduled to go to Council on January 17th, which happens to be the very next council meeting. So we don't have a meeting next, the second meeting in December was dark. The first meeting in January, or scheduled meeting, was dark, so we will not be meeting to the 17th. 17th? Yeah, not 20th. Okay, so that's the Fairview Park Master Plan. It's very exciting. We think we have an amazing consultant that's going to come in and do a lot of great things to support Fairview Park and provide direction and maintenance plans and things like that for that park. So we're super excited about that. I do want to thank Commissioner Murphy. It's been a short stint as commission terms go, but it's always been a pleasure having you. And, you know, I remember fondly our first discussion as you were joining, usually that intro meeting where I get a feel for what the commissioners will be like. It was one of my favorites. So thank you for your time served and good luck. And I'm sure I'll see you around with all of our compatible, incompatible activities, including the joint use agreement. As far as the governance calendar goes, we really try in this director's report to give you an idea of what's going on with projects, but we can definitely try to change it into a format that you think is more appropriate in terms of longer term. Sometimes we spend a lot of time putting calendars together, but things change daily and weekly, and I don't like giving outdated information, but we'll work on some sort of a calendar of upcoming projects. And I think that's, you know, a great segue into kind of an embarrassment of riches right now with all of our wonderful elected officials, from supervisor to assembly to senators that just are throwing money at us for these wonderful projects. I don't know how we're going to juggle them all. We're talking about how to get project management staff on board that can really help see these things through, because it's a lot of money and a lot of fantastic projects. So yes, it's kind of an embarrassment of riches at this time, and it's going to be hard to keep track of them all. Some of them will go rather swiftly, but others will require design, review, and some of that's kind of boring. And, you know, it'll take 6 months without much of an update, but we'll try to put together a calendar to give you an idea of what's going on to the best that we can. The additional grant funding, yes, it was announced at council on Tuesday that Supervisor Foley will be funding both the cafe at Lions Park and then additional improvements at the skate park. So again, projects that have been included in the CIP, but one of them not necessarily funded in terms of the cafe. So that'll be exciting to get that going, a completely different project than some of the other ones. A lot of money dedicated towards Fairview Park and, you know, many of the projects that we have ongoing at Fairview Park. So that's exciting. I think before I turn it over to Monique, there were a couple of more related CIPs just to point out. We do have a sign going in at Wilson Park that I forgot to list in here. So if you've driven down Wilson, you'll see that sign. The footings are all in, and I've heard that the sign itself is all ready to go and just dropped into place, do some landscaping and be ready to go. And then make sure cars don't hit it, right? Don't come up the curb. So there's that. Commissioner Doran Parker mentioned the Brentwood Park meeting, and we're still working on a couple of issues that we need to before we engage the community. But once we get those meeting dates set, the commission will be invited. And, you know, we'll give notification prior to so that you can share with your constituents, regardless of what district you're in or what neighborhood you're in. I mentioned the Fairview Park Master Plan, the Jack Hammett Sports Complex. We had a fantastic project that was completed or mostly completed, you know, earlier this year. However, we have found that there was some damage done that was not identified until later on. So now that we know that there's been some damage to lights, we're trying to get that damage complete. Our city engineer, Sung, is in the back. I'm not going to call him up to the podium just yet, but he's been working with staff on trying to get those lights fixed, because only half the field lights work on fields 1 and 2, and that's not acceptable. So we've had portable light trailers and things like that just to try to help get football and soccer things done. I think that concludes the October one. For the upcoming events, it's kind of a repeat. That's what happens when you skip a meeting, but Snoopy House, it was previously mentioned, and I do want to give special kudos to Monique. She is kind of spearheading the Snoopy House effect, or the Snoopy House event. There are other staff members helping that, you know, it's a pretty long list at this point, but over from the public works side, you know, Rob has a group of staff that are instrumental in getting all of that equipment over, using the tools that we don't let Monique use, the saws and things like that. But you know, they did quite a bit of touch-up, refurbishment and all that stuff to the Snoopy House stuff before it came over, and there's always touch-ups to be done now. If you walk it, you know, it looks beautiful, but we still have a little bit to go with a week left before it opens officially a week from tomorrow. So with that, I will turn it over to Monique for a quick update on programs.
I'm going to try to make this short. I'm still getting over a little cold, so bear with me. Just touching base and going off of what Director Minter just said about Snoopy House, I just Want to thank Rob and his crew specifically. I just want to call out the names of Daniel Hohola in maintenance and his team of, Nick, Julio, Alex, Tung. There's a handful of guys that really worked hard, especially transportation. Juan Santos and his crew, they move those structures at 3, 4 in the morning to get them over here, and it's no easy task when they set them on the grass, and then I say, no, I want them rearranged, so just, really, really want to thank them. They do a lot of hard work throughout here, all day, every day for 2 weeks, just getting everything ready. Also, from the city manager's office, Francine Jimenez and Evis, they also help organize a lot of the stuff. So, and then my staff from, Tiana Johnson, Tatiana Madrid. So there's a lot of us that work on this event to bring it together. And, it's a lot of hard work, but we do it for the community because we know it's a longstanding tradition, and we really want to bring the joy and the magic of the holidays to Costa Mesa. So I just wanted to, piggyback off of that. We had a lot of good events. I know it's been a long time, but, we had Barktoberfest. We also had the Trunk or Treat event that we participated in at IKEA with the Power of One Foundation. So those were all very huge October events. In Thanksgiving, we actually had a Thanksgiving lunch at the Senior Center. I believe Director Minter helped serve food along with our city manager and a couple other city manager staff. So we appreciate them volunteering. At the Senior Center, we do, and that's one of the big events that have come back since COVID. In the Senior Center, December 15th, they have the Breakfast with Santa, which is always one of the biggest events at the Senior Center. So I encourage you to check that out. I know it also starts next week. That's also next week. But it's always fun to see the seniors gather for the holidays. They get to interact with the Santa. So that's just another fun thing that's coming up. I know that we had mentioned a lot of things about, checking the website and looking either for municipal codes or how to look at parks. We do, I think, expect a new website to be launched sometime in January, if not early February. So just be on the lookout for that, and hopefully there's ease of access of navigating some of the things that, we try to direct you towards to find. And just ending on, we hope to bring you in the new year more staff presentations where you get to know some of our staff that run programs, and they can talk a little bit more about the program so you can meet them, really understand their specific programs that they're responsible for. You get to see their faces, who they are, and how passionate they are about what they're doing at their jobs or their sites or their facilities. So hopefully in the new year you get to know some of our staff a lot better than me just saying it or Jason just saying their names. And that's all I really have. And so I just want to wish everybody happy holidays. And I'm open for questions.
All right, a couple more things. And please, you are all, as commissioners, welcome to represent yourself as commissioners if you come to Snoopy House. Official opening is Friday, a week from tomorrow. It runs through the 23rd. There's school group presentations or performances that are happening this year that we weren't doing last year as we still continue to climb out of the COVID bubble. But, you're always welcome to show up, let staff know that you're here and say, hey, I'm commissioners, or any, if you want to volunteer, if you want to help. You always need people in the sledding area. But no, if you want to volunteer, you just want to show up and stand in the city booth and help hand out, the giveaways that are a secret right now. You're definitely welcome to do that. And then one other big exciting announcement, officially tonight, shortly before I walked down here, the Tennis Center RFP was released. So it's been a bit of a labor of love. 2022 will always be known as the year of the Tennis Center RFP. Because of the timeline being around the holidays, it's probably extended longer than a normal RFP process would be. But if you do have constituents that were interested in the Tennis Center RFP, I encourage them to go on the website and check that out. And with that, I echo Monique's sentiments. Happy holidays to you all. It's been a pleasure in 2022, and we look forward to just so many things happening in 2023. It's always a pleasure working with Rob and seeing him at these meetings and our interactions as he's pointing at his what? No. And then I really do thank Brenda for being here tonight and stepping in to help us out when we were having some staffing issues. Because her expertise is always welcome here at our commission meetings, even if she probably has other things she'd rather be doing. But all right, and with that, I will conclude my report.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Director Minter and team. We appreciate all of you. At this time, we'll briefly open this item for public comment. If there's any members of the public that wish to comment on the director's report, now's the time. Is there, awesome, nobody on Zoom. We'll close public
No,
comment.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
And then commissioner comments. Ms. Brown.
No, you go.
I just wanted to talk about Barktoberfest. So my family and I attended, and it was, as we were walking up, we were laughing out loud. It was hilarious seeing all the dogs in costume. That was a lot of fun. And probably the thing that we most enjoyed there was the city booth, actually, with the paw prints. So at Barktoberfest, you could go and they had clay rolled out. You could do your dog's paw print and then take it home as a memento. And we have them at home. We loved it. So I especially liked that. I am an event lady, though, so I have a lot of constructive feedback that I just want to pass along for Barktoberfest. And I will say, as a parent raising a daughter in this century, I find that a lot of activities are based around consumption. And so I'll go to events, and so much of it is about buying things. So tents set up to buy things for your dogs, or the food. I like the food trucks, but as a parent, I'm like, well, how could an event about dogs, so I love the adoption aspect of Barktoberfest. I think that's great. But I'm like, what else could we do at Barktoberfest that isn't about buying something for your animal? And just thinking out loud, and I put this out there and would be happy to talk with the staff members involved, but what would educational components around dogs look like, so that as kids are there learning about animals, learning about working with animals, learning about professions in which people engage with animals. I have a daughter who is particularly interested in animals and dogs. What would that look like, so that they had an opportunity to maybe meet veterinarians? I was thinking about agility training with dogs. So they had a section at Barktoberfest where the police dogs were there doing demonstrations, and we missed it. But I was, and I thought, okay, that's cool. But what about a dog agility routes, and what if we could watch some dogs do that? That would be a fun show. And what if you had an opportunity to do that with your dog, some kind of low-key agility setup, just so that there's something engaging for the dogs to do other than walk around. And then I was thinking about, what about the artistic elements of dogs? So, there's so much dog portraiture out there. What would a station that encouraged you to sit down and do that, or even if it was a dog selfie station, right, where you're not buying something, but you get to have a fun photograph with your dog. I was just trying to think about, how do you take an event like Barktoberfest, which is a great idea, and how do you build it out so that people can walk away with a variety of mementos, even if they're not physical mementos. So those are some of my suggestions. And then I'm also somebody who believes a lot in feedback from the public. And so I would love to see an idea board at a place like that, so that you have all of these community members there with their dogs. What would an idea board look like? Maybe it's ideas for the Barktoberfest, but maybe it's like, what are the needs of dog owners in Costa Mesa? And I know when you put that out there, there is some sort of responsibility to respond, but I would be curious to know what residents have in mind. So those are just some thoughts I had about a fun event.
It's so funny you talked about that, because one of the things that I had talked to our shelter is, what kinds of things do you need donations of? I have like a crazy ball dog, my lab. When we go walk around, she goes near tennis center sites and she finds those tennis balls that are in the bushes and everything. I have like buckets of tennis balls. So that would be a good idea of what kinds of items. I know they need old sheets and towels and blankets and things. So that would be some way that we can't have another dog, but boy, how can we support our shelter? And the other part, I know that Monique had talked about using it to educate on what is it like to be a responsible dog owner, utilizing our parks and that kind of thing. So great ideas. I like hearing that.
Yes, definitely want to echo that. There's a need for amenities for our furry little friends. Commissioner Murphy, do you have any comments?
No, just, I don't, I wish I had more to say about Barktober, but I just drove by and saw a zillion people there, and then I kept going. Because it looked really packed. But no, just it's so great everything that the city manages to do with a great staff. So thank you for all you do, and we appreciate you. And happy holidays. Have a great new year. Looking forward to seeing you over comments, over the phone that I'm sure I'll be making on a regular basis, and or in person. And thanks for all of your time and attention. We appreciate it very much, especially you, Director Mittner. It's really good to work with you, and so hope we have a great holiday.
And what I just want to say again about Snoopy House, and I think I said it last year, is it started in my neighborhood across our street. And I'm so thrilled, and I have just so much gratitude that the city decided that it was worthwhile to continue it after the family sold the house. And not only just continue it, but to really understand the spirit of what it did in our neighborhood and how everybody around the city would come in and our neighbors would serve as the elves. I know I served as 3 elves because one of the moms recruited us. Some cook cookies all the time, and it was really a community-based event. And I just cannot thank you enough. I cannot thank the city enough, and Director Minter and your whole staff for really getting involved, because we know how much, we personally know how much work it is, because so many of us began to help that family as they aged to move everything out, and as he built new items and then motorized it. So I just personally, from the bottom of my heart and my gratitude, to continue this, because it is not an easy task, but it really is truly, when they say Costa Amazing, that's really part of Costa Amazing, is that Snoopy House. So just personally, thank you so much.
Mr. Jordan does show up. He usually comes 2 or 3 nights at least to check on our work and make sure we're staying true to it. So far, I think we've, satisfied his demands, but it is aging. It is, it's I don't want to say antiquated technology, because that would be implying there was technology, but it's just, it is.
It was amazing.
It's a wonderful tradition.
In the 60s and 70s when he built it, it was really mechanically amazing. But yeah, it's a lot of mechanic parts.
The nativity is still fascinating, that how he built the nativity. So we need to keep that one going for as long as we can. But it is fascinating. And when I first got here, I probably didn't understand it as much. But it gets into your skin, and now all of a sudden it's Snoopy House, right?
Definitely want to echo the thanks and recognition for staff's work on that front. I do have a punch list to run through, so bear with me here. But there's, as we alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, Jason and to the whole city team, with these, the flurry of different funding announcements that's happening related to parks and community services, I think we do need an increased measure of communication and transparency for the public to follow these developments, so they don't just hear about it in the daily pilot and then never hear about it again. So just namely, the master plan status, where is that at, and when can the commission expect to see that?
If that's a question that you want me to answer, I can't answer it at this time. But I will keep you in the loop, meeting to meeting, on how close I believe that we are to getting it brought before the commission.
Got it. So we're still on the master plan. Appreciate that update, Jason. We also heard from the mayor at the city council meeting. The fly field still hasn't been reopened, and so I just wanted to ask, where is that at, and if you could provide a status report.
Sure. The Fairview Park Steering Committee, as the advisory body specifically for Fairview Park, did deliberate on the updating of the Fairview Park, the flying field, glider, launch zone, whatever you want to call it, for 4 meetings, which for them every other meeting is it's bi-monthly or every 2 months, with potential changes to it. And if you were watching or paying attention to the Fairview Park Steering Committee, at the end of the 4th meeting, they agreed as a committee that they did not support the reopening of the flying field, which staff had 3 objectives from the city council. The first was to work to reopen the fly field. The second was to consider alternative locations, including Fairview Developmental Center, and then I believe the east side. So there was 3 different charges that staff were tasked with. We have met with HSS multiple times, including maybe the week before Thanksgiving, about some of the alternatives. Staff are currently evaluating programming opportunities, things that maybe weren't necessarily the same as they were before, but we're trying to take the guidance that council gave us and bring back something that they can act on. And again, the advisory body of the Fairview Steering Committee did not agree with the recommendation in trying to navigate how we're going to bring that back to council in a transparent and open fashion. So it's something that we work on daily. Kelly spends a lot of time dealing with these topics. It's just that I wish it was as easy as, oh, let's reopen the flying field. Part of the flying field itself was either adjacent to or in a vernal pool, right? So we cannot reopen it the way that it was previously designed. And that's, it's not an easy fix, especially Kelly juggling things like the Fairview Park Master Plan, which I think is probably the #1 priority for most users of the park, most stakeholder groups in the park, is to get that started. So with competing interests, with the embarrassment of riches that are coming forward and trying to navigate projects that we are going to complete, I'm not saying it's not a priority, because we're constantly reminded of the fact that it's not open. We do have to be cognizant of nesting season, and there are times that staff had recommended that we should not have the flying field open to begin with. So there was part of that time as well. But the steering committee did take a much longer period of time than we anticipated, and that decision wasn't made until September, I believe. So that's the status on the flying field.
And I appreciate that history, Jason, but I think we need to drill down on that a little bit, because because it went through that process. It went through the Fairview Park Committee, then to Parks Commission, then the City Council provided direction that I thought was fairly clear. And after the City Council provided direction, I'm questioning the necessity for it to have gone back through that process of 4 different Fairview Park Committee meetings, when I feel like there was already pretty clear direction provided by City Council.
The request to update the ordinance related to the flying field, just like the commission is reviewing an ordinance to make recommendations to the council about that ordinance, is what the steering committee did. That was their due process. We did not anticipate, when we brought it to them in February, that it would go until September. So yes, there was a timeline that the committee, through their deliberation process of making changes, making more changes, did delay that process. But in the council asking staff to update it or to change the municipal code to allow gliders, the review process is it goes to the Fairview Park Steering Committee for their review to the language. Again, our recommendation to staff wasn't to keep it closed. It was to do what the council asked, which was to create changes to the ordinance to bring back to council for approval. But the advisory body, again, the group that was assigned by council to review these things, went a different direction. And that's not necessarily what we thought might happen. So it's thrown us for a little bit of a kind of a curveball that we're trying to navigate through before we bring an official request back to council for their approval.
Understood. And I appreciate that, Jason, but I'll use the similar phrasing that you've told me before. And, the committee and the commissions is not where the buck stops. That stops with City Council. And so if they're, they get a bite at the, we always get a bite at the apple, when key things come forward. And, it sounds like they got 4 bites at the apple, not 1 bite at the apple. So I'm wondering, at what point, is it just before the Fairview Park Committee for review and their input, or are they the sole decision-making body on this? Because I'm wondering, and I'm just asking that question in the spirit of, this has been, on the radar for a while, and, we want to get this moving. We don't want this to keep getting kicked around. And so if that body can't make a decision, do we let them put a roadblock in the process? Because I don't think that we have to let them put a roadblock in the process if we're advisory bodies. You know what I mean? We get to give review and then it moves forward. So I'm wondering if we can get that process moving with the Fairview Park Committee, because this, there is an important user group out there. All the user groups are important in the park. Everybody that's using the park is important. And, these people have a passion that I want to recognize, so.
And I hope that you appreciate that it wasn't staff slowing down the process. It was a constant communication between multiple stakeholder groups that what continued that discussion over the course of 4 meetings, right? It was feedback from the community, both HSS, not both, but HSS was involved in those meetings. The Audubon Society was involved in those meetings. The Fairview Park Alliance, that has a vested interest in the park. All of those groups were participating in the conversations that we would make progress, but then there would be holdups. So I think just as the commission, if the commission was reviewing an item and decided that they weren't ready after 1 meeting or even 2 meetings, so I wouldn't look at it as 4 bites at the apple. It was still one review process of the same ordinance. It just happened to take 4 meetings, but I don't necessarily agree that it's 4 bites of the apple, but it's as long as the committee took before they would make their recommendation. And I think the PACS Commission is entitled the same opportunity. If there was a divisive issue that the commission could not settle in 1 meeting or 2 meetings, you would still want the opportunity to take as many meetings as necessary before you made your recommendation to council, especially when there was division amongst multiple stakeholder groups. So we haven't had any of those issues quite yet, but there may be things that come forward that pit commissioners against each other where you do want that additional time for research. Staff were asked on multiple occasions during that process to retool, re-explain, re-explore, provide more documentation to that. So I hope that it's not looked at as they were just slowing it down. There was constructive feedback that was brought before each meeting before ultimately that decision was made.
And I appreciate that explanation, Jason. So I'll drop it at that, but I do think in the spirit of the mayor's comments at the meeting, there is some wondering about, how long this is going to take. So I think it would be appropriate to, encourage the Fairview Park Committee to reach some sort of decision, or if they can't reach a decision, you can always bring it back to us or just bring it back to the council, quite frankly. So that would be my recommendation on that front. All right, sorry, everybody. The Tewinkle Lakes project, could you give an update on that?
I will turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, Chair Rutherford. Yes, we're still in the design phase. We're probably at about 90%, close to 100% in the design phase. A few minor things that need to be worked out. One of the major components was the electrical system and reviewing that in electrical design. We've ironed that piece out with the design firm. Right now it's in staff's hand. We hope to have some more feedback for the design team next week after a few more discussions. I don't have a date yet as when that will go to council as far as the design, but we are at 95.5% on the design phase. So it is moving.
Awesome. I appreciate the update, Mr. Ryan. The Ketchum libel upgrades. It's been a few dog years now since we had that community meeting. I know it's on your radar, Jason, but if you could provide an update specifically where that's at.
For sure. The community meetings that were held were in response to a grant application that was due 1.5 years ago. After the community meetings, the packet was put together. It took probably almost a year before we found out that we did not receive that grant. So that was part of a different project. What we're at now is we're trying to finalize the RFP for design for Ketchum Liebelt Park, and we've expanded the footprint or the scope of the project to not include just Ketchum Liebelt Park, but other property areas along Victoria, or what I affectionately call the Victoria Corridor. That includes, at the last council meeting, Councilman Chavez mentioned a potential park at Pomona and Victoria. That would include that property as well. So our goal is to get an RFP issued shortly after the first of the year to have a design firm selected, right, that can design improvements to Ketchum Liebelt Park. And then there's probably 4 or 5 areas along Victoria, including that one, that it would all be designed together. So all community input would come in together, and we would be able to complete a corridor type project with all feedback instead of taking them kind of one parcel at a time. There was so much impact or so much feedback that was presented at those community meetings of, you know, you can't put 50 things in a park as small as Ketchum Libel, but if we can take some of those suggestions and maybe spread them out along the corridor, as long as it's done safely, knowing traffic and, you know, all the other things that need, you know, security lighting, but we're trying to be able to create a design process to implement many of those recreational open space type opportunities all the way down Victoria. So hopefully shortly after the first of the year, you know, working with Public Works, because, you know, they have a huge hand in this project too, but working together with them to get the RFP launched for the design of that. But yes, we are on a timeline, so that will be something that does take, you know, priority shortly after the first of the year.
That's exciting news. I appreciate the update. The LED lighting at Jack Hammett. Do you have an update on that?
We don't have the funding yet. There's still a process in terms of getting the funding going. So council, during the council meeting on Tuesday, the resolution that just even allows the city to engage in the conversations about the funding from the state, that was approved by council. That's the first order of business, that we had to get the resolution done. So now that that's been approved, we can start lining up the projects. I think that the Musco project is probably going to be one of the quicker ones because we've already been engaged with Musco. Jack Hammett, due to the fact that the lights at Jack Hammett aren't that old, we would be starting with the tennis center and then the T. Winkle Sports Complex, is those two facilities first before getting to Jack Hammett, but trying to pull them all together to try to conserve, you know, resources. But that is one of the concerns when we were adding Jack Hammett, is they're not LED lights, but they're not at the end of their life like the other lights are. But yeah, that's an exciting one, and that should be one that happens rather quickly. It's really about, you know, making sure we get the application in for that project, getting the timeline together, ordering materials. You know, that will be a challenge just because of the limited nature of the supply chain for that. But as soon as we get the green light from the state to move forward on that project, we will. In conjunction with Public Works, of course. They get to play in all of these, so Rob won't be left out.
Exciting times. I'm almost at the end of my punch list, so bear with me. The Shalimar Park grant funding, I assume that's in the same boat, but could you provide an update?
Shalimar Park is a tricky one. There's been a lot talked about, but it's such a small park. Is try to make use of those resources the best we can. So it's not without ideas. As Rob knows, it's something that we do talk about, you know, frequently, in trying to find what's the best use of that money for the neighborhood. There's been talk of acquiring property. There's been talk of how do we expand it. There's been talk of trying to make use of that space, whether it's the street, the parkway. So it's, you know, we're running out of time to kind of deliberate and consider different options, but we are looking at plans to take the quarter acre that's there and repurpose it, revitalize it, new playground equipment reconfiguration, things like that. But those decisions haven't been made yet. Most of it will be done most likely without, you know, a landscape architect, but working with, you know, local or other companies or playground companies to see how we can best do it. There will be significant concrete work and maybe some potential grading or some of those things that might need to be done, but putting together a plan is yeah, for Shalimar. And I mean, it's, again, we have this money, but we don't have a lot of space to do anything with. So how can we best optimize the space that's in that park? And again, it's 0.24 acres. It's about the size of these chambers, and like, how do we get the most out of it for that community? So there will be a community input phase. It will likely be a project that the commission gets to take you know, a chance at in terms of public feedback, but that will be coming forward to you, and I'll try to make sure I include that in the calendar.
Awesome, appreciate that. And if you guys are having any trouble with ideas for Shalimar, have a community meeting. Invite some of those folks in, you know, to hear their input. Last thing I'll ask about is the funding for Fairview Park. That was also included in the MIN package, if you could provide an update on that.
There's so many potential projects at Fairview Park. I know going through the process, trying to identify, you know, a lot of the estimates that we had in the capital improvement program were just that, estimates. So We're still trying to retool and figure out which project would be most appropriate for that funding. Now that there's been multiple, well, it's really the singular funding source, but how much can we get done? How many of these projects can we get done with that money? And what the focus being on public impact, right? And right now we just don't have solid enough estimates to be able to say, all right, yes, this is what we're doing for sure. And I know during recent council meetings, there was requests from the council that the public have an opportunity to suggest to do their public input. So we're trying to work on getting all that coordinated as well. In fact, we thought there'd be more discussion on Tuesday, but it didn't happen.
Well, I appreciate that's on your radar. Same thing with the Shalmar upgrades. Yeah, why not throw a quick community meeting together and invite people in? You might hear an idea that might get you going. So, okay, cool. Well, that's the end of my punch list. Thank you, everybody. Seeing no further comments, that's the end of the director's report. So we will move to receive and file that. Thank you, Jason. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. So if there's not any additional commission member comments, any staff comments, now's your time.
I would just like to personally thank Commissioner Murphy for your service stepping up a needed vacancy, but now your leadership moves into a space that's really critical. As we know, that the space Newport Mesa Unified occupies in our community is critical, the education, both TK-12 and adult, but also how much your leadership will be needed in collaboration with use of space. So I just want to personally thank you. It's a big commitment, and I for one, appreciate all that you give the community and that you will give in the future. So thank you for stepping up.
I'll second that motion. All right. Well, we're going to adjourn then. We're going to adjourn. What time is it? At 7:37 p.m. until our next meeting on Thursday, January 12th. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. Happy holidays. And we'll see you all again soon.